Hello and welcome to Media Monitor on the SABC News Channel, independent and impartial. Now this is where we take a look inside the world of media, analysing the trends, the issues and the reporting of some of the week's top stories. I'm Peter Ndoro and this is what's coming up on the show. Are you a freelancer or finding that this might be your future soon? This is a path that many media professionals have had to face, either by choice or by circumstance. Well, today we ask, how do you cope and how do you make a go of it as a freelancer? As the fourth industrial revolution forces innovation, is the face of journalism about to change with the rise of Robo reporter? And we find out why an old South African favourite, Warner magazine, is bucking the trend, showing good growth in an industry where many others have been in decline. We have our regular features, of course, a look at the newspapers, and we also look back at a time when your thoughts, in fact, what I want to know is what your thoughts are on these particular issues. So please engage us on social media and use our social media platform on Twitter, hashtag SABC Media Monitor. Hashtag SABC Media Monitor. Please, we want to hear from you. But first, let's take a look at what's on the front pages of the Sunday papers this morning. All right, let's begin with the Sunday Times, and the lead story there this week is about Tshwane Stevens Mkhalapa with his party, the DA, wanting to know more about a mystery 1 billion rand mystery tender that he issued for a smart city, apparently tailored to suit Chinese tech giant Huawei, and this was whilst he was on a trip to China at the company's expense. The City Press has the SABC on its front page, reporting that the SABC has managed to regain some rights to flight PSL football matches, but it appears, and this is according to the paper, that a major fight is underway with employees facing the axe and allegations of a battle in the boardroom, tasked with turning the broadcaster around. The Sunday Independent has a story of a Johannesburg lawyer, Raymond Challam, who is accusing judges of corruption, rigging court outcomes and trying to abuse cost orders for political purposes, especially against the public protector. The lawyer says that the South African judiciary is tampering with evidence and causing files to disappear. The Sunday Tribune headlines with a story of locals living around the Hluhluwe Imfolozi game park being terrorized as predators are escaping the park and attacking livestock in the area. A multi-million rand contract is being probed following the escape of several predators due to corrupt awarding and handling of a fencing tender worth more than 30 million rand. And in the Western Cape, the Weekend Argus on Sunday has the very sad story of a 6-year-old girl, Natalia Pienaar, who was shot dead whilst playing outside her home in Lavender Hill in Cape Town. Her shooting apparently the result of escalating gang violence on the Cape Flats. All right, so there's so much to get through on the show this morning, and helping us make sense of these stories are my guest editors. We welcome Gary Alfonso, who's the founder and director of Natural Language Generation, and Bongiwe Chikri, who's the editor of Warner magazine. To both of you, a very good morning. Give us a wave.
Good morning.
There you go. All right. Let's get on with the show now. In the past few years, hundreds of journalists and media staff have lost their jobs due to retrenchments. Some of them were offered freelance positions as an alternative, and others, well, they've chosen to become freelancers to take some control over their futures and perhaps even give themselves an opportunity to increase their sources of income. But just how challenging is life as a freelancer, and is it one to be feared, actually? We asked a few media professionals that are freelancers at the moment what their thoughts are on this.
It is quite scary, and of course we know that unemployment is a huge problem in South Africa. The media industry in particular is under a lot of pressure if you look at layoffs and the kind of lack of advertising and resources for the press. That all puts pressure on even full-time employed media professionals. So working as a freelancer, you're then faced with another, battalion of challenges as well. So, it's tough.
Freelancing is okay as a side gig. And then you must just have like something permanent where you know, okay, I've got this coming in, and then I've also got like freelancing gigs on the side. But if you're gonna decide I'm going to freelance all the way, it's honestly hard, because there are times when the industry is just super dry and no one needs your services, and then now you need to be looking at what else can I do besides photography, besides what else, the stuff that I already know how to do. So like in my case, I've started venturing into other facets of the industry. So when I realized it got a bit dry beginning of the year, so I got into helping people with their social media accounts. So I'd help them manage their social media accounts, and I'd help put events together. And yeah, so that's how you do it. You just start doing bits of this and that just to make ends meet, because it does get dry.
You basically have to be a good saver. You have to save up money. You have to have different savings accounts. Also, another challenge is that you can't buy anything. You can't buy a house. You can't buy a car, because you don't have a what do they call it? The bank will ask for like a contract, not even a contract. They'll ask for they want something from your work, right? Yeah. To say that you are full-time employed, just as a surety that they can lend you money to buy a house or a car. As a freelancer, you can't get any of those things from the bank. So you literally have to save up for everything for you to at least pay half of the amount for what you want to buy.
Right, now I'm joined by someone who knows all about working as a freelancer and has written quite a bit about it, actually. She's an independent marketing and PR consultant, a freelance writer and social media manager, basically a professional freelancer. Marissa Lowe, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Peter.
All right, so, we hear this word all the time. So what actually is a freelancer?
So freelancer is someone that is contracted by an organization to help on shorter projects. So it's not someone that is in a company that earns a salary.
Yeah.
If there's a need at an organization, you get called in to write, for instance, an annual report, because it's not useful to employ someone full-time to just write an annual report once a year. So freelancers will be brought in to help with things like that. And a lot of consulting in terms of social media. Some companies are smaller companies and they don't have a marketing department.
Yeah.
So you'll bring in a freelancer to assist a smaller company to assist in a field that they don't have an employee.
So it's not a full-time employee, and basically when you're needed, that's when you're needed, and when you're not, you're looking for other gigs.
Absolutely.
So you've written quite a bit about this whole thing, and you say that you need to approach being a freelancer in the same way as a salesperson approaches their job. Take us through that. What do you mean?
So as a freelancer,
Yeah.
it is very important that you understand that you have a sales target.
Yeah.
If you don't set yourself a target, if you don't know what your income, what income you need, how can you know what jobs to go and look for?
Right.
So a salesperson literally has to have a target. If you work in Incredible Connection as a salesperson, you have a target. I need to sell X amount because I earn commission.
Right.
And as a freelancer, that's a very similar thing.
Okay.
So you need to have your sales target. You need to make your sales calls. You need to make sure that you have a list of people you want to approach. I cannot, as a marketing professional, approach someone who doesn't need my service.
Right.
Then I'm going to waste my time. So I need to identify where someone needs my service. I can't buy any laptop. I have a need when I buy a laptop. So as a salesperson, if you want success, you need to sell me that laptop that I need, not just any laptop.
All right. So
and it's the same thing.
What other things do we see? I mean, I'm seeing this list behind us. In fact, if we can go back to the first one, I'm quite curious about some of the things that you've pointed out there. So market yourself, create awareness about your services, build a database. You're almost running a business, isn't it?
Absolutely. As a freelancer, you need to market yourself in exactly the same way a brand would market its products and services. If I'm not on social media, if people don't know about me, how can I work? So it's so important to build a personal brand. That's the other thing. You will see everywhere that I tell people, call me M. That's my brand. I built a brand. You need to establish what it is you want to be seen as a brand. Take that, build it. Use it on social media. Social media is so powerful. You can reach out to people. You can see what it is they need, and use that to make sure that you put yourself out in the public
Yeah.
where you can be seen as a freelancer.
So there are some pitfalls, I guess, to this game, especially if you don't know what you're doing. Tell us about some of these pitfalls and how we can avoid them.
I think one of the biggest ones is knowing what to charge. I often get young entry-level freelancers say, how do I determine what do I charge someone?
Yeah.
You need to know your worth. That's very important. They are, because we don't have benefits like someone with a salary.
Yeah.
We don't get paid leave. If I want to go and leave in December, I need to make sure that I plan ahead so that I have enough work now that I can go and leave in December.
Yeah. Is this regulating your income?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then what's this managing your time?
Managing your time, that's the other thing we have as freelancers. We often find ourselves, because we need that money, we still short 5,000 Rand next month to pay something.
Yeah.
We are so busy, but we need to take more work. So often we take on more work than we can actually deliver on.
So you've got to say
That's important.
no sometimes.
You must learn.
There's only 24 hours in the day, unless you eat bar one. Okay.
That won't help either.
Do your admin. What's that about?
From an financial perspective, the admin is extremely important.
Yeah.
Because we're not regular taxpayers.
Yeah.
We are provisional taxpayers. So that is a huge admin. You need to keep all your petrol slips, all your data that you purchase, so that you can use that and draw up an annual statement like a company would, so that you can do your tax e-filing at the end of the financial year. That's part of the admin. Not just that, knowing when to invoice. Are you going to invoice as you do the work, or going to set out a day and say, I'm invoicing on the 25th of the month?
Chasing
like
your
a business.
debtors. Chasing your debtors.
Absolutely. That's all the admin. That also takes up time.
Yeah.
So you can't say a day has, let's say for a freelancer, average days between 12 and 16 hours most likely. You can't say that's the amount of hours I have to work. You need to keep 2 hours a day for admin. And you need to keep that in mind when working out what am I going to charge. Because I need to pay for my telephone, for my internet. That's not free. So it's not just my time you're paying for. I need to calculate all my overheads into what I charge.
Beyond social media, now that's a big one, isn't it?
Absolutely. That for me is like any brand. You must be seen and you must be part of the community. It's not just posting. Brands who just use social media to get a voice out there, not engage with their community, won't help you. So it's part of, as a freelancer, you need to engage with your potential customer. You need to make sure, on LinkedIn for instance, I have this thing on LinkedIn where I, at least once a quarter, make sure I contact my connections on a personal level.
Yeah. So but what do I do if I'm a freelance cameraman? What do I do on social media?
You need to make sure that your portfolio is out there, that people understand what you do, because that's the other thing.
So some of the things that I've shot and experience.
Yeah. And connecting with people that may use your services. Corporates always need videos to be shot, and we need cameramen to do that. So there's opportunities. You must just find them, look for them, spend time to search for them.
So a lot of people might be thinking, you know what, if I've got a full-time job, I've got pension, medical aid, and some kind of security, so this freelancing game might be quite scary. Is it scary? But there must be some advantages to it.
Look, it is scary.
Yeah.
It's not easy. It's not easy knowing that my next contract ends at the end of August and I still don't have a new contract. Or I know my contract runs until December. I need to replace that contract after it's finished. But the enjoyment of being a freelancer, of managing your own time, that is what made me become a freelancer. I don't have to ask someone if I want to go to the doctor. I don't have to put in leave if I want to go to the doctor. If I want to go and watch my child play rugby, I can do that. I don't have to say, I need a half day off, please.
And I suppose it does give you some mobility that you don't have one employer, but you do have to, that admin thing, think about medical aid, think about pension, because now it's your own responsibility.
Absolutely. And I mean, one of the other advantages for me of being a freelancer, that's a big plus, is the fact that you can plan around things and do things that you've never done, and variety. That's the thing. To make it in the freelancing world, you have to diversify. And that variety, some people thrive on it. I enjoy it.
Right.
So it gives me many things. I work in different industries at the same time. I'm not stuck behind a desk in a field of engineering, only working on engineering marketing. I get experience across the field, and that's what makes freelancing so
And that
nice.
exposure as well gives you, I guess, when you work at one company, all you get to know is that company and how that company works. But when you're working for several, you're exposed to new things as they develop, I guess.
Yeah. And growth, personal growth. Working that way grows you as a person in the way you would never imagine.
Are there support organizations that you can join to help you as a freelancer, associations maybe?
In South Africa, there's the South African Freelancers Association. They work mainly with freelancers in the media and communication space. So you would register with them, and they have a database of freelancers. Where someone who needs a freelancer can go and search for a freelancer, and they have a Google group where we share ideas with each other, we share job opportunities with each other. And then one other organization that I'm registered with as well to get jobs is a company called nosweat.work.
Okay.
And that is a brilliant organization. You register, it's a process to register because they literally check every single credential that you have. But once you're on there, you get notified of positions similar to what it is you do.
All right, so bottom line, you're saying some people are going to be retrenched, particularly in the media that we're in. Don't fear, don't stress. The freelance game is not as scary as it seems.
It takes a bit of management, learn how to manage your time, and
market yourself.
Market yourself, that's the two big things.
Marissa, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much
Peter,
indeed for joining us.
Thank you so very much. It was lovely being here.
All right, so look out for Marissa Lowe's articles. She's written quite a bit about this whole freelancing game, because I know some of us have been freelancers for a long time, but maybe something that you are going to find yourself becoming in the near future. So prepare yourself for it and just think about how you might manage that situation. All right, stay with us. Coming up after the break, I'll be joining our guest editors, and we'll be taking a look at Robo Reporter. What on earth is it, and how's it going to help us? Stay with us. Right, it's now time for us on Media Monitor to focus on the Robo Reporter. And the question is data replacing the human being in the modern day newsroom? Increased levels of artificial and augmented intelligence in journalism have raised questions about the impact of content automation on especially digital platforms. Now, earlier this year, a US-based company, Automated Insights, released a report titled The Rise of the Robo Reporter, and illustrated just how data automation is changing the world of media. Now, before I speak to my guest editor, let's take a quick look at this clip.
Well, the thing about robot reporters is that they're still a bit stilted, and I'm sure that over time the technology will get to a point where you won't be able to tell a robot from a living, breathing human being born of another human being. But I think there will still be space for nuanced kind of analysis and opinion writing. So automating hard news stories seems to be inevitable, you know, putting together the who, what, where, when, why, and so what. I think over time technology will be able to take over those functions, and it's a reality that we as journalists need to face. You need to be adaptable, you need to be pragmatic. But there are other aspects of journalism and storytelling and news and being an empath, you know, relating to other people, especially as a reporter, you'll know yourself, that I think human beings are uniquely skilled to do.
All right, so what on earth is a robo reporter, and is artificial and augmented intelligence replacing people in the newsrooms? Well, somebody who can tell us is Gary Alfonso. Gary, what on earth are we talking about here?
Peter, I think, as that lady in the clip alluded to, it's inevitable that data and human stories are converging in the world of journalism, and particularly on digital platforms. So how that happens is important, and how we not only maximize but also take advantage of the scale and the speed at which automation can do some functions, and particularly leading on from your earlier discussion about freelancing and take away jobs in the workplace, etc. The reality is that there's a whole lot of data that we are simply not getting information on, whether we're a content consumer or working as a journalist or publishing a digital website. So some of these augmented intelligence platforms, dashboards, and graphics that you start seeing emerging on digital platforms like Google, etc., you're starting to see much more dashboard explanation of things.
Yeah.
The next step in that is called natural language generation. So what augmented intelligence means is it brings a narrative to the data that we previously would not have seen, and in some cases particularly where the data is repetitive and maybe mundane for that matter, why are so many people spending so much time trying to create insights from it when they should be doing the investigative part and doing the finding the story part, and some things just automate naturally all the time, and that's what artificial intelligence and augmented intelligence can do these days, taking data and turning them into stories.
So is this why media companies should really be employing this much more?
And they are. Media companies globally are starting to make use of technologies like natural language generation, which, by the way, the Forbes Technology Council predicted 2 years ago that NLG, or natural language generation, would be one of the leading augmented intelligence technologies in the world of where narratives and where words are needed to take data in its data format and turn it into a narrative in any language on earth. That's the challenge, because we're talking here in English, but the reality is, why can't information be available, across different languages? And so coming back to what the whole process of NLG is all about is to turn data, and in a much easier to understand structured data, into a narrative by creating the processes and the systems that helps you do that, and then bring scale to your operation. Because again, how are you seen? How does your content emerge in a digital environment is very important, and that's what NLG helps organizations and media companies do, and they're already doing it.
And as you're talking, people don't understand just how much data we're generating. I remember a statistic 2 years ago that said that 90% of the data in the world had been created in the previous 2 years. So it is enormous, the amount of information that's out there, and how to make sense of it, I guess, is the challenge here. So you've got NLG in South Africa. It's making its way across the continent as well?
Absolutely, and I think part of perhaps what we'd like to show is the fact that natural language generation in South Africa is working as we speak in local councils, in municipal areas where smart city subjects are starting to be created. And the reality is that there is a strong component of bringing understanding in natural language in organizations or in environments where people might not necessarily understand the technicality of the data, but where a narrative brings understanding. And ultimately, we became journalists because we wanted to tell stories. What happened? Suddenly stories were overtaken by graphs and graphics, etc., and suddenly that human interaction is missing. So as you say, over the past 2 years, the volumes of data in the world is just becoming unmanageable. We're at the cusp of this fourth industrial revolution, and the next revolution is less than 20 years away. And what we know about that in the digital phase
is 5IR
is the next phase. So the reality is that every cycle reduces by half the interaction that a human being is losing with information. Wow. So information is becoming more and more important, and how we then translate that information and visualize the data and the understanding is becoming more important.
Give us an example of how data is turned into a narrative.
Okay, you take a straightforward let's say an Excel spreadsheet or a dashboard data spreadsheet, and where in a study or case example it would be data that comes out on a weekly basis or a daily basis or a monthly basis. Ultimately, that information comes to you or the organization or an individual in the same format. It's structured. So, but what changes every day or every week are some of the things, like either sales go up, or crime levels go up, or political party support changes, or tomorrow's temperatures. And one of the case studies currently underway is doing weather reports in all official languages in South Africa, for instance.
Right.
Why is that not possible? That a person in Venda and a person in Northwest or a person in the Northern Cape cannot receive the same weather report every day in their home language because the data is the same.
Right.
So therein lies how one can create templates and algorithms to read exactly the same data, and then that data goes into a program like Wordsmith from Automated Insights, and that program then, by setting up the templates, creates a narrative in different languages for people that can be dispersed to 22 million people across South Africa that have smartphones, because that's the reality.
Wow.
So why not have that capability, even as a public broadcaster or a national broadcaster? That can be done now and is being done in many places across Africa, where people, and particularly in East Africa, where there's perhaps a very strong focus on technological drive and technological platform transformation, where these kind of technologies and smart technologies, and there's a difference between artificial intelligence and augmented intelligence, because one learns by itself and the other one still needs a human guide in order to ensure 100% accuracy and trustworthiness. So those two things are constantly developing.
I'm going to come back
and changing.
to you just now, because I want to bring in Bongiwe, because when he mentioned languages, I was fascinated, because Bona magazine, 4 languages I think that you publish in. So when you start hearing things like this augmented intelligence and managing data, is this something that's on your radar, just given the world that you're in, and how to better serve your readers?
Definitely. I mean, I'm very interested in the idea of, we publish in 4 languages in print, but our digital platform is only in English, simply because we don't have the manpower. We can't get, and especially because on digital moves so quickly. So you're uploading stories at such a quick pace that you can't catch up, and you can't have time to translate it before you upload it, And something like that would then work for us digitally, because it's essentially taking the same information and translating it, and then being able to serve your reader better. So my reader that's buying in Zulu at this moment has no choice but to read English on my digital platforms, which is a problem. And I think that's where that would fit with us specifically.
So some people might say it's all very well to automate and a lot of this stuff, but is it taking away some of the human softness and sort of heart things that human beings, how do I keep that in there, but using all of this data?
Peter, I think the two will always live side by side. Human beings will drive technological change, and technology will try and take more from the early industrial revolutions, things like production plants and automation in machinery, for instance. All those kinds of environments have always constantly interacted with the human being and sort of encroached on human activity. I think the 4th industrial revolution and technologies such as augmented intelligence and smart analytics, for that matter, I think those technologies allow us to define who we are as human beings ultimately in how we tell stories. The fact is, why have a human being, or a reporter for that matter, spend 2 days trying to analyze a data set where that could be analyzed really quickly by an automated system, and let the human being go and find the why it happened, and what, and so what, and what next? And I think therein lies the great linkages for this kind of technology in a journalistic or media environment, is the fact that it gets people back to doing people things. We should not be doing automation all the time. Automation should be sorting that, and we should be smart in dealing with information and how people want to interact with us as content consumers.
All right, and perhaps finally on this topic, Bongiwe, I guess if you had the power of all of this, it might change the stories that you tell.
Yes, I think it would. I think we'd have more time, perhaps, for our, because also with a lot of the breaking news stuff, it's basic. You don't necessarily need a human being to be sitting there. It's not investigating. It's not. They're literally just breaking something. And I think that then it would free up a digital editor to being able to go out and do interviews and look for other stories and be able to work in that way. So it would help a lot.
All right, fascinating. Okay. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll hear a lot more from Bongiwe, because for some reason, Bona magazine is doing well in an area that a lot of magazines are disappearing. What is she doing right? Find out after this. Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor now. We turn our attention to magazines now. It's an industry sector that's been under pressure for some time, and sadly many titles have disappeared in recent years. Dwindling circulation and drops in advertising revenues have made selling magazines harder than ever before. But bucking the trend, though, is one magazine that most South Africans alive today will have seen on sale their whole lives. Bona magazine, the only magazine in South Africa that publishes in 4 different languages: English, Zulu, Sotho and Xhosa. The 63-year-old brand has managed to hold impressive circulation sales with double-digit percentage sales increases in a number of quarters in the last few years. Well, let's chat now to Bona magazine editor, Bongiwe Chikli, who's one of our guest editors today. So this is quite impressive. You must be very proud. 63 years old. I mean, I'm a bit younger than that. So it's been circulating since in my entire lifetime. How is it, as other magazines have been falling by the wayside, you found ways to keep it on the shelves?
I think that, we've changed quite a lot to modernize and also understand what our reader what our reader actually expects and needs from us. We do a lot of research, and also when you look at just in general what's happening with black women specifically, the time has gone where we were being told that you had to look like this. For you to be successful, you have to be this, you have to be driving this, you have to be living this way. And at this point, black women want to be accepted and celebrated for whatever shape or size they are, for whatever industry they're in, for whatever tiers of success they're at. And I think that Bona does this really, really well. I think we're able to cater to different women. We're able to give advice on how you can better yourself on your own level. Don't chase somebody else's level. And this is what has made us very different from other brands, where other brands maybe are still focusing very much on this. You have to look like this. Yeah. This is what success looks like. Yeah. This is what a happy person is. And I think with Bona, we are celebrating women who are diverse. And that's what we see in the world over. Black women saying, we are tired of being told that we have to look a certain kind of way. We want to be celebrated for who we are, and that's I think where Bona's getting it right.
All right, so you talk about diversity. A lot of magazines will say that our reader is aged between XYZ, earns this kind of money and works in. Are you saying that you're talking to all black women in South Africa, or is there a band that you're targeting?
No. Our reader is between the ages of 25 and 35 mainly, right, with a few spillovers on each end. However, this woman can celebrate success, a successful 23-year-old, and can celebrate an 82-year-old being successful. The idea that you can't have an 82-year-old on the cover has always been quite ludicrous to me, because why do you have to be a specific age to be on a cover? So this reader wants to read those stories, but she also wants to read about the young one who's, trying to start a new business. And then also the veteran, how she's succeeded, how she's done things, how, so it's about including all of that and then targeting the specific reader. So
South Africa's changed a lot just in the last 25 years. How has the magazine been able to track those changes? You talked about research just now.
Yes. So we do a lot of research. We work with a company called Opinion Solutions. I'm literally constantly talking to them on almost a weekly basis. We do research into our digital readers. We do research into our print readers. We look at what beauty trends they're enjoying, their buying habits, their spending habits, how they interact with their children, their concerns when it comes to their children, their concerns when it comes to their family. I think what's really important about this reader as well is that she is an influencer. So not only is she the person that people come to for help financially, she's also the person they come to for advice. So she has to then, advise on, where do you think my child should go to school? Where do you think I should be, should I buy this car or this car? So she's the type of person who influences a lot of people, which is where you see then the difference between our numbers in circulation and our readership. Our readership is over 3 million, and our circulation is around 75,000. And you see that because she's passing the mag along. Right. I read this, and I think you'd be interested in reading about this. I read this, or I think you'll find this interesting. It pertains to your situation. And you're seeing that passing on happening quite a lot.
So what does Bona do in 4IR?
I think that, for the longest time, I used to be a digital editor before I was a print editor. I think for the longest time, there was this like craziness where we were all in media, went crazy, running for the hills because we were told that digital was coming and it was going to destroy all print. And I think that right now what we're trying to do is balance that out. You know, stop focusing so much on digital, bring it back a bit and give print some love. And I think print suffered as a result of that because there was no one was focusing on it anymore because we're so concerned with the fact that we're going to lose our jobs. And I think we're seeing ourselves come back a bit more. And what we're trying to do at Bona is that I'm trying to make sure that we balance what's in print with what's on digital, but you are getting two different things, you know, but there must be a continuation of the conversation. If I'm talking about ageism in, you know, a specific issue, that conversation must continue on digital and the reader is then able to immediately engage. The problem with print is that, you know, we're working so well ahead, you can't engage with that content, but on digital you can. So you can then engage there. We have things like Facebook Live finance advice that we do with our finance expert, where literally she'll write an article on buying a house. Any questions that then you have after reading that article, you're able to tune into her Twitter Live, her Facebook Live and Instagram Live, and ask her immediately questions that she can answer following on to the article. So we're trying to create that type of environment where there's a constant 360 give and take between digital and print.
Fascinating. Gary, you've been in the media game on different platforms, television, print, everything. And I just wonder your take on this. Why is it some people still want a hard copy? I mean, I find it difficult, even now, to read a newspaper online. I actually want to buy a thing and put it in my hand. What is that?
I think what magazines like Bona Magazine have been able to do is to absolutely tap into the sentiments of their base. And the fact is, you know, your base drives what your audiences ultimately, everything from their lifestyle, their choices, their questions, their insecurities, and ultimately you can't share your iPad 1,000 times when it comes to sharing an article or a but you can do with a magazine. So understanding that environment, I think, has been very important for a publication or a platform like Bona Magazine. The time will come probably when digital has a much greater role to play as the digital environment grows. But the reality is the digital penetration rates in South African society is not as great as it is in a first world country like the US. And ultimately when it comes to readers and that fantastic 25 to 35 aspirant women in the environment is it's just a gold mine for advertisers. So ultimately that will translate to digital as well. But in its moment, it's a nice to hold, something to read, something to take, and you don't need electricity. To read it.
So data.
No. So ultimately, sitting down on a Sunday morning with a newspaper and with a cup of coffee, I'm still that guy. But I'm probably 50% of all content I consume now is in digital format in different places. But ultimately, yes, I do walking down the aisle in a shopping center and opening a magazine and then making the choice to buy one or two is, in this case, obviously very strongly tapped into a target market and an incredible base of readers.
So what's fascinating is that now, you know, we have things trending every single day. Your magazine comes out once a month, and so how do you make sure that your articles and your news has longevity, but you've also got the digital platform that can switch every day if it needs to?
I think what we're doing is that on digital, it's what's trending, it's what's breaking. And sometimes some of those topics, we then take and investigate them for print. So it becomes a fuller length article where, you know, on digital we'll just say, okay, I spoke to this expert, this is what it is. But when it comes to print, we're actually really delving into the issue. Where did this stem from? We speak to experts, we get people who have had first-hand account of what's actually happening. We get advice. We go beyond just the breaking and trending news to a fully fledged piece now that's taking you deeper into the issue. Even with our beauty and fashion, what you're seeing on digital is very quick, you know, on the go type of tips. Whereas on digital, on print, now we're talking about, now really we're going to rescue your hair. This is how we're going to do it. And I think that's where we are able to balance that out a bit more.
Okay, fascinating. Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably a business article for an MBA thesis or something.
Yeah.
All right, so Bona Magazine, 63 years old, can you believe it? As I said earlier on, there are people alive today who've never known life without the magazine on our shelves. Talking about history, it's time now for us to dig into the SABC News archives and go back in history to 1994. And this story that we found looks at how South Africa's first democratically elected leader, Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, spent his first 100 days in office. Let's take a look back.
So how has the Government of National Unity performed over the past 100 days? And how does the report card look for its leader, President Nelson Mandela? Linda van Tilburg compiled this backgrounder.
There are major areas of desperate need in our society. As a signal of its seriousness, to address these, the government will, within the next 100 days, implement various projects under the direct provision of the President.
This was the promise President Mandela made to the country on the 24th of May with the opening of Parliament. Since then, he has announced a feeding scheme for primary school children, free medical care for pregnant women and children under the age of 6 years, and a public works program aimed at rebuilding townships. Mr. Mandela has enhanced his status since taking office, both locally and even among the right wing, and especially in Africa. In South Africa, he's seen as a symbol of reconciliation, and in Africa as a symbol of the African struggle for freedom. But in the long term, President Mandela and his government will be judged by the success of his reconstruction and development program, and it's still too early to say whether that will be a success.
All right, so that was a look back in time. That was the first 100 days of Nelson Mandela's presidency. He did finish his own one and only term. But right now, we come back to the future, and time now for us to take a look at what's in today's newspapers and some of the headline stories. And I'm going to start with you, Gary. Is there a particular story that grabbed your attention? Which paper was it in?
Well, I think the City Press story on the SABC, being a former broadcasting man myself, I think, grabbed me. And the interesting dynamic between what is the broadcasting environment changes happening in terms of paid television and free-to-air television from a rights perspective. And then also the dynamic of the minister stepping up and saying that there's been a solution, and perhaps leaving some questions about where the decisions are made or taken, etc. While obviously some issues around the financial cost of rights. So I think an interesting dynamic in all of that for me is the questions that it leaves for the television environment and perhaps the much broader TV environment from a sports rights perspective. ICAS has done studies on this. The Competition Commission has studied this. In the broader perspective, the question has to be, where are the lines drawn between what people are prepared to pay for on a pay TV platform, which helps the sport grow, versus the right of everyone to watch a football match live, and how that is broken up and divided into what people obviously first love of millions and millions of South Africa. So it simply cannot be withheld. But where does the sports rights sit? How much can a sports rights holder then
and
try
can
to retain?
Football belong to one private entity that can set it off to the highest bidder? I just find that quite fascinating, and I'm curious actually. Women readers, I see them at the football matches. Bona Magazine, women readers, are they watching these debates and interested and worried that their football's not on the screens?
I think they are. There's definitely a conversation around access, in general. And especially when you're looking at how we're doing economically as a country, people are paying for things that you feel like shouldn't be a luxury is a definite conversation at this point. There are certain things that where we feel like we should be able to have access to football matches. A football ticket when you go to the stadium is so cheap, but stay at home and watch it. It's actually costing me more. That's crazy. So they are involved in those conversations.
So what story stood out for you at all? Which paper?
I can't remember which paper it was in, but it was about corruption in the judiciary.
Oh yes, okay. That was the Sunday Independent.
Yes. I think for me this keeps cropping up. It's not the first time that somebody has made these allegations. I think it's extremely scary. It's frightening because as a society, there's a certain level of we need to have a certain level of belief and faith in the fact that our judiciary actually is incorruptible. And the fact that we keep coming back to this one story about the judiciary being corrupted is a big problem. And it doesn't seem to be a thing where we're actually ever investigating what's going on. We're very comfortable to have a story like that and then move on. And then, 1 or 2 years later, we come back to the same issue again. And it's a very big problem because then what is it exactly that we're saying will be the consequences, or how can people believe that there's fairness at the end of the day? I think that was a big one for me. And obviously the Mangosuthu stepping down, the IFP.
New president, I mean
that was a big one for me as well this weekend, because all I've ever known the IFP has been Mangosuthu.
Can the IFP survive without a personality like him? Because, like UDM, he'll deny it, but there are certain personalities that are actually the party. Some might even argue, that Julius Malema is the EFF. What do you think about the IFP's future? I don't know if a lot of people even know Mr. Clavius.
No, and I think, Peter, in the 90s, I spent many months living in Ulundi, covering the 1994 elections and then the regional and provincial elections. I lived in a small room in the back of Prince Dablamanzi School, C-section, Professor Manana's house, and the stamp of Mangosuthu Buthelezi across that society is so massive that I think it's difficult to see a future of the Inkatha Freedom Party, the IFP as we know it, for a very long time, as what was effectively a deal struck in 1994 to preserve some kind of homeland status and IFP influence. We'll remember from the 1994 elections to the 1999 elections, the support of the IFP dramatically fell because there was no political understated support, and in a deal in order to keep the IFP in the government at that stage. So, but yet, I think with distinction, Mangosuthu Buthelezi has been able to serve as a statesman in Parliament, and he's shown perhaps what it takes to be, a consummate statesman, beginnings notwithstanding. But a consummate statesman, and whether or not the IFP as a political party, and then again as a cultural movement, does it have enough time, or has it have enough traction in the environment to sustain as a cultural movement based on very traditional values?
There's some younger voices coming through in the party that you see more often. It almost seems that there's going to be some kind of reinvention that needs to take place. And I wonder if this man that's coming in is of the right generation to do that.
For me, that was the first concern. I just felt like, in general in politics, we're seeing a lot of political parties always being led by a certain age group, which then means that the youth vote is not really being looked at and is being disregarded on a certain level. Because then I have to wonder, can you actually relate to some of the things that I'm going through? Some of the things, I don't even consider myself youth anymore. But can you relate to some of the things that, my little brother was born in 1992, can you relate to some of the issues that he's going through? And can he look at you and think, oh my God, this is a leader that will actually be able to deliver for me? So I think, I'm not entirely sure that it was such a great idea to elect somebody who is of that age. But at the same time, I'm interested to see what Mr. Hlabisa is going to do. I don't know much about him, so I'm interested to see what changes he's going to instill. Maybe he has, a few things up his sleeve. So
it is fascinating. But the story that you started, I want to chat again about, because it is very serious. We've got a lawyer, and he's probably going to be sanctioned a little bit for this, because they've got a way that they can talk. And I just wonder, aren't there enough checks and balances? Because even if in a lower court something doesn't happen, you can go to a higher court, and then you can go to the Supreme Court and the Constitutional Court. So surely that's enough.
I think it's a huge concern that a case which is 26 years old, and particularly this past week, the Sariti Commission being overturned by a court, the findings. I think looking at that as an overall context, that there seems to have been, and it's not only now, we're not only talking of short-term political scores being settled. I think it is of concern that for such a long period of time there seems to have been manipulation of the judiciary, which I think the South African brokers of power can do no better than to simply look at the judiciary and to simply say, can we keep that clean of all kinds of interference? Because it seems to be too easy for party political influence at very, very high levels in court to almost cost the taxpayer an additional who knows how much that could be applied elsewhere. That's the issue of ultimately what this guy is saying that there is a serious question around the fact that lawyers and the legal fraternity.
Fascinating chat, but I think he's probably going to get a call from the legal counsel, whatever they're called. To both of you, thanks so much indeed for bringing brilliant guests and brilliant guest editors. Your insights have been fantastic. Good luck with your magazine.
Thank you.
I look forward to automated, artificial, augmented intelligence in our newsroom here at the SABC. Thanks very much indeed to you at home as well for joining us, and join us again at the same time next week for more of the same. Have a great week in between. Bye-bye, everyone.